Good night, good evening, good morning. My name is Vitor Diaz. Currently, I am the Vice President of the Canadian Spiritist Council. Tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce Thiago Leite. Thiago is also a director with the Canadian Spiritist Council, where he coordinates the area of communication and technology, representing the Council at the International Spiritist Council in the area of Spiritist social communication. Thiago is also a member of the Allan Kardec Vancouver Society, where he volunteers in departments such as social assistance, doctrinal studies, mediumship, and Spiritist youth education. Thiago also works as a project manager. Thiago, the space is all yours, my friend.
Hello, thank you, Vitor, for the intro. Thanks, everybody. We're very happy to be here today to talk a little more about mediumship, remembering Allan Kardec's medium book, 160th anniversary. We'll specifically talk about two essential parts of the book, as announced: contradictions and deceptions, and charlatanism and trickery. But before that, let us remember that the Spiritist doctrine teaches us that spiritual manifestations, they have been around since the ancient times. The use of this faculty hasn't always been for the common good. Throughout Earth's evolutionary history, we can see cases of personal interest, material profit, transforming mediumship into a true profession, as though an attribute given by God could be sold, commercialized. So today we're very honored with this opportunity to try to bring some more light into this topic of mediumship, especially about this very important work of Allan Kardec, the Medium's book. Special thanks to the International Spiritist Council for the opportunity as well. But let us remember a little. Let's go back a little over 2,000 years ago and think about Jesus. Think about his arrival on the physical realm. With Jesus, we saw what mediumship is when serving a greater purpose. He revealed the infinite possibilities of a healthy exchange between the physical and spirit worlds, showing us beautiful examples of the most diverse mediumistic phenomena, and the most beautiful as well. Jesus not only exemplified, he not only practiced what he was preaching, but he enabled his apostles to continue with the task of showing the world the possibilities of our psychic abilities. With Jesus, we had the first signs that it was time for mediumship to mature, to reach new levels. It was time to use mediumship in the service of good. By following his moral teachings, we could sublimate that faculty, becoming faithful instruments of God. Understanding our weaknesses, of course, Jesus knew that it would be a long journey for us. We would still need to go through a lot of darkness and a lot of pain until we could better understand his teachings and the sublimity of this essential and powerful psychic sense. The Apostle John, he writes Jesus' promise that at the right time, the Comforter, the Spirit of truth, would come to teach us all things and remind us of everything he has said to us. That's in John's Gospel, chapter 14. Finally, at the right time, on April 18, 1857, the Spirit's book was published, bringing light to humankind, explaining, clarifying, remember everything that Jesus once told us, following a divine program designed by Christ together with God. The Spirit's book materialized on the planet to unveil the spirit world like never before, explaining who we are, where we come from, where we're going, showing us the relationships that govern the physical and the spiritual realms. The material experience is a stage through which the spirit must pass before entering the spirit world for good in the realm of happiness and truth. However, the Spirit's book was just the first step. That divine program was not finished yet. Despite explaining the relationships that govern the spirit and physical worlds and everything that keeps us connected to the spirit world, it was necessary to develop the mediumistic question, which should no longer be seen as something trivial, as something we do just for fun. Mediumistic abilities are very important to each one of us. As we learn with the spirits, mediumship is a holy institution and should be taken seriously. Finally, on January 15th, 1861, or 160 years ago, the Medium's book, the second work of the Spiritist codification, was published, a breakthrough in the mediumistic issue that would prove and confirm the existence of the spirit world and how we can be better instruments of God through our mediumship. In an article in the Spiritist Review of January 1861, when talking about the launch of the Medium's book, Kardec says that the first moment of curiosity caused by these strange phenomena has passed. Today, since their source is known, let us avoid profaning it with poor games, and let us strive to draw from it the adequate teaching to ensure our future happiness. The field is too vast, and the goal important enough to get our full attention. Until today, our efforts have been dedicated to directing Spiritism towards this sober path. If this new work, the Medium's book, making it even better known, can contribute to preventing it from being diverted from its providential objective, we will be fully rewarded for our care and our service. In the introduction of the work, Kardec says right away that we shouldn't hope to find a universal and infallible recipe for training mediums. No, that's not the point. The work aims above all at educating mediums, and it is up to the medium to do their part. The spirits, they do not give us formulas for things that we can resolve ourselves. They show us the path. They may inspire, they may guide us throughout this journey, but they'll never do the work for us. Just like when we're little, when we go to school or even university afterwards, our parents, they support us, they guide us, but they cannot go to school for us. They cannot take the tests on our behalf. There are things that only ourselves can do. So we can develop, so we can grow, so we can mature. And what are mediums? By mediums, we understand all of us, humankind. Since we're all subject to the influence of spirits, incarnate and discarnate, because we're also spirits, right? With the difference that we're now inhabiting a physical body. So we're all the time establishing psychic connections. Have we noticed that, for example, when we're excited about something, after a while that excitement increases? Or when we're sad, we start at some point feeling even sadder. Or when we're concerned, anxious about something, that anxiety seems to grow over time. We're all the time establishing connections because we're nurturing those feelings. Of course, their intensity is going to grow as well because we're feeding them by connecting with other minds who think just like ours. So we establish these connections based on our feelings, habits, passions. However, it is very important to point out here that we shouldn't blame the spirits for our misfortunes. We shouldn't do that. Because we only establish these connections because we open our mental home to them. We allow them to connect with us. And oftentimes, we are the ones seeking to establish these connections by our actions, like we said, by our habits. That is reciprocity. There is a connection when there is a sympathy of ideas. This is all mediumship. In the Medium's book, we can find fundamental explanations where Kardec teaches us that spirits, they're not beings apart from creation. They are the souls of those who have lived on the earth or in other worlds. The only difference is that they no longer carry a physical body like we do. Men, that is, all of us incarnated, are temporarily inhabiting a physical body. And when our body dies, we return to our true life as immortal spirits that we all are. Spirits, therefore, they constitute an entire invisible population around us. We also learn in this very important work by Kardec that we are made of three components. First, the soul or spirit, the intelligent principle in which the moral sense resides. Second, the body, the material and dense envelope, which the spirit temporarily uses as a garment for fulfilling certain providential designs. And third, the perispirit, the semi-material envelope, which serves as the link between the soul and the body. Kardec teaches us also in the Medium's book that under certain circumstances, all spirits can manifest themselves to humans, and the number of those who can communicate is unlimited. Spirits communicate through mediums who serve as their instruments and interpreters. Now we're talking about a more distinct, clear type of mediumship, which is when spirits, they manifest themselves in more explicit ways through an intermediary or medium, producing written, spoken, visual, sensed effects, among others. Since the spirits, they're nothing more than those who have already inhabited a physical body, they can be good, they can be frivolous, ignorant, depending on the life they led while on earth. Spiritism shows us through numerous facts that we do not become pure simply by discarnating, simply by returning to the spirit world. Purification, it occurs through several incarnations, through several existences or lives. The Medium's book shows us the many different categories of mediums that are out there. It is worth studying chapters 14 and 15, where Kardec will address physical effects mediums, hearing mediums, speaking mediums, seeing mediums, healing mediums, among others. However, mediumship is like a spectrum. Even in the case of the same mediumship, it can manifest itself differently from one person to another. And this is very important because sometimes we tend to think that, well, in fact, there are even articles out there or videos talking about mediumship symptoms and check boxes so we can mark if we feel this, if we feel that, we should be mediums. But that's not how it works. Like we said, mediumship is something very serious. It's a whole institution and should be taken seriously. We should look to study, to educate ourselves on this matter so we can understand more on the topic. Things won't just come to us. We need to learn to search for answers. And Spiritism is very good with that. If we only take into account the Spirit's book, for example, there are over 1,000 questions and answers, 1,018. And then we have the Medium's book, the Gospel according to Spiritism, Heaven and Hell, Genesis, and many other works. So we have a lot of information to study, to digest, to reflect. And another very important point that the book brings us is related to obsessions. Look how wise Kardec was here as he put the subject in the Medium's book, precisely because we're all mediums. And since they are related to the sympathies we just talked about, to the connections, they also fall within this topic. We learned that obsession is the domination that certain spirits may acquire over certain individuals. This domination is always the work of little evolved spirits. For good ones, they never exert any kind of coercion whatsoever. Instead, they provide counsel and fight against the influence of evil spirits. And whenever they're not listened to, they prefer simply to withdraw, because they respect us, of course. Now, if little evolved spirits lead us, it's because we allowed, like we discussed. But how is this permission granted? The moment we open the doors of our mental home for any thoughts that take us out of balance, any thoughts that don't match with the purposes of enlightenment or moral transformation, thoughts of anxiety, of sadness, of hatred, vengeance, anything. And let us pay attention to that. Superior spirits, they do not insist. They do not violate our consciences, and they never interfere with our free will. That's a very important teaching from Allan Kardec. We also learn with this very important book about the various types of communications. And this is a very important matter because it helps us understand when we should pay attention to possible contradictions, deceptions, and charlatanism. It offers us the tools we need to identify, to recognize the types of communications that we come across, helping us avoid spirits that want to have fun at our expense, for example. Speaking of contradictions, with so much happening and communications coming from various parts of the world, Kardec draws attention to some points here, warning that many of the so-called contradictions were more apparent than real, and they come from two sources: men, ourselves, and spirits. He tells us that human contradictions, they are due to various reasons. They can originate from some systems we created as a form of denial. Yes, we tend to deny things that we are afraid of. So we create a bunch of different systems just to move away from that. Because sometimes we let our pride do the talking. We let our pride command us. Because perhaps we don't want to do any work towards our moral transformation. Because it's a lot to take in, it's a lot to absorb. Can you imagine acknowledging that we are imperfect beings? We are far from perfect. Most of us, we think we're so perfect that we're above everybody. But that's not the reality. We learn that from the spirits. So how can we judge, for example, an artwork if we don't know the technique? If we don't know the artist's thought, how he employed the technique? How can we judge a scientific paper if we don't know anything about it? That's the same with Spiritism, with mediumship. We need to study, we need to develop a little more in order to criticize, to judge. Because the Spiritism is an open doctrine, and we can, for sure, we can judge. Kardec invites us to ask questions, but after studying, after giving it a chance. Otherwise, we're going to keep that very little knowledge on the topic. We're not going to be able to expand, to understand more. To understand the cause and worth of the contradictions of spirit origin, we must identify with the nature of the invisible world by having studied all its various aspects. That's in chapter 27. We must remember that there are presumptuous and theoretical spirits just as among humans. Since only pure spirits know everything, for the rest, as for us, there are mysteries that they explain in their own way, according to their own ideas, and about which they can form correct or erroneous opinions. Out of vanity, they want these opinions to prevail, and they love to repeat them in their communications. The error lies in the attitude of some of their interpreters, who rashly espouse opinions that violate common sense and regard themselves as solely responsible for divulging them. Thus, the contradiction of spirit origin, they arise from by the natural diversity of intelligence, knowledge, ability to judge, and morality of certain spirits who are not yet capable of understanding and comprehending everything. In my first initiation in Spiritism, second part of the book Posthumous Works, Allan Kardec says, One of the first results I gathered from my observations was that the spirits, being nothing more than the souls of men, they had neither full wisdom nor integral science, that their knowledge was very limited to the degree they had attained in advance, and that their opinion was only as valuable as a personal opinion. Recognized from the beginning, this truth preserved Allan Kardec, from the dangerous choice of believing in the infallibility of spirits, and prevented me from formulating premature theories based on what had been said by one or some of them. Kardec was very careful. He studied a lot. Then, what is the use of the Spirit's teaching if it does not offer us more certainty than human teaching, we may ask? The answer is simple. Kardec says that we do not accept the teachings of all humans with the same confidence, and between two doctrines, we prefer the one whose author seems more enlightened, capable, judicious, and least subject to the passions. We learned about the universality in the Spirit's teaching, that when the truth arises or when a revelation arrives, it will not come through a single source. As Kardec says in the introduction to the Gospel according to Spiritism, if there were but one interpreter, no matter how favored he or she might be, Spiritism would barely be known. Kardec had the help from close to 1,000 authentic Spiritist centers around the world to assist with the Spiritist codification. As he brings in the introduction to the Gospel according to Spiritism, he would send the same question to several mediums around the planet to see if they matched, to see if they had something in common, therefore confirming the authenticity of the answers. As he states in the introduction to the Genesis, the Spirit's book has seen its credibility solidified only because it is the expression of a generalized collective thought. And we can extend that statement to each work of the Spiritist codification and other supplementary works brought by mediums such as Francisco Cândido Xavier, Ivone do Amaral Pereira, Divaldo Franco, among many others. So how can we pay more attention and identify a serious from frivolous communication or even from a possible charlatanism? Well, the answer, Kardec's answer, the Spirit's answer is we need to study. We need a dedicated, a systematic study that will help us gain more insights on the topic. Now, if being mistaken is unpleasant, it is even worse being deceived. Moreover, it is an inconvenience from which we can easily protect ourselves by studying. So why are we so easily deceived, we may ask? Why there are so many opinions out there, so many types of communications? Well, Spiritism is a rational doctrine. Under the noble guidance of the wise organization of the Spirit of Truth, Kardec brought us the important point of rational faith, marking the end of mysticism, of the supernatural. According to chapter 19 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, one believes because one is sure, and no one can be sure unless they have understood. That is why rational faith does not collapse, for unshakable faith is the kind that can stand face to face with reason in all human epochs. Let's stop falling victim to deceptions due to our pride, our vanity, our need to want answers to satisfy our illusions. Why do I need certain answers that are only about this material world? Like if I'm going to make more money, if I'm going to meet the special one, if I'm going to be doing this or that. All material questions. Are the spirits really going to take their time to answer to these questions? I mean the serious spirits, the superior spirits. Are they going to take the time to do that? Because they're so busy helping so many people in need. So many people going through a lot of pain. Kardec, he makes it clear that the spirits, they are not at our disposal. They are not charged with teaching you about the things of this world, but with guiding you securely in what will be useful to you in the other. When they address the issues of this world, it is because they deem it necessary and not because you request it. If you see spirits as substitutes for fortune tellers and spellcasters, then you will be deceived, says Allan Kardec, chapter 27 of the Medium's book. If you see spirits as substitutes for fortune tellers and spellcasters, then you'll be deceived. Why do we need to take so much time with frivolous questions when we can take our time to learn more about important moral issues, such as how can I become a moral person? How can I become a medium with Jesus? How can I help my brothers and sisters, humankind? How can I love and respect myself so I can love my neighbor? We learn with Spiritism that anything can become an object of exploitation. So there are no surprises when we learn that there are also people who want to exploit the spirits, even more in a world as diverse and imperfect as ours. And we could be one of those people. Oftentimes we are. That's why we must be careful with the information that comes to us. Kardec always tells us about the importance of careful analysis, reflection, comparison. Is this message coming from a single source? Or do I see this communication coming from other parts of the world? He left us a robust foundation so that we could understand the fundamentals of the relationship between the spirit and the material world. And here we are, often so distracted, immediately believing everything, like buying the first communication that appears, like those that come from WhatsApp or any other social media channel. Sometimes seeing completely distorted ideas. We don't even bother verifying their authenticity. And sometimes we even share them. We propagate that lie. We're often caught up in our personal interest, in our need to want a return on the things we do. Mediums for hire are not only those who ask for payment. Such self-interest does not always appear as ambition for material profit, but also as a pretense of any kind that may support personal desires. So it's not only about money, there's more to that. Sometimes I want the fame, the spotlight. Sometimes I want to be on TV. I want. But what does the doctrine want? What does Jesus want from me? Are we asking ourselves that question? We have so many wants, but do they match with Jesus's plan for us? Kardec says that this is one of the weaknesses that mocking spirits know very well how to exploit, skillfully and astutely taking advantage of it, and lulling those who fall under their influence and deceptive illusion. So mediumship is granted for practicing the good, and the good spirit withdraw from anyone who intends to transform it into a means for reaching anything contrary to the designs of providence. Selfishness is the scourge of society, and good spirits, they strive against it constantly. Therefore, one should never suppose that spirits would ever want to aid it. This is so reasonable that it would be needless to insist on this matter, says Kardec. Little evolved spirits, they love to deceive, but they do not like to be deceived. Even though they may spontaneously share in the games and caprices of curiosity because they enjoy amusing themselves, they dislike being exploited or serving as accomplices in money-making. Moreover, they're always proving they have their own will. and that they act however and whenever it seems best to them. And we must be careful here, because sometimes we establish these connections, we think we're taking advantage, we think we're becoming superstars, we think we have the spirits at our disposal, but oftentimes it's the other way around. And the falling from it could be very painful to us. It could cause some serious problems for us, because our conscience will know it. Our conscience actually knows whenever we go against natural laws, whenever we go against our spiritual nature, we suffer. So our conscience knows. It's not like God is going to punish us. No, he loves us, spirit. But we ourselves are the one who are going to punish us. Our own consciences. That's why it's important for us to study, to learn more on this topic, to definitely try to get a better understanding of the Spiritist codification, on what the spirits want from us, what Jesus wants from us. He already said it. He loves us no matter what, but he wants us to study, to develop, morally speaking, because we've done amazingly in terms of intellectual development, but now it's time for the moral part to catch up to it. Even when restricted to physical manifestations, mediumship has not been granted for putting on shows. Those who think that spirits are under their orders for public exhibition may rightly be suspected of charlatanism. Let us always remember this when we see ads for spiritist or spiritualist gatherings with paid admission. And remember what we will get when attending these shows, says Allan Kardec. What will we get? Are these shows, like Kardec said, helping us to develop morally? Or they're just only touching our senses? Are they going towards our hearts or only our eyes? This is very important to us. Because as spirits, as immortal spirits that we all are, we all have our time on the earth, on the physical world, to develop, to acquire new skills, to improve. So Kardec is saying here, is actually urging us not to waste our times with things that are not relevant for us as immortal spirits with a limited time on earth. An absolute disinterest is the best guarantee against trickery. If it does not always ensure the excellence of intelligent communications, it deprives evil spirits of a powerful means of action. Perhaps one could say that a medium who devotes all their time to the public cannot do it for free because their life is dedicated to the cause. This is a misconception, thinking that those who are so involved with spiritual work are exempt from the work of the material world. In the history of Christianity, starting with Jesus himself, no one has ever been exempted from material work. On the contrary, those who worked the most were precisely those who made an effort to follow Jesus' teachings. Francisco Cândido Xavier, a great example of a medium with Jesus, he worked very hard since his childhood to help support his family. After he started his mediumship activities, his journey actually increased. Sometimes he would barely have any time left to sleep, as he would work overnight at the Spiritist Center. During the day, he had his material work, and afterwards, Spiritist Center for his mediumistic work. And Spiritist as well, because even though he was a medium, he worked with his mediumship. He also took the time to study, to read through the Gospel according to Spiritism, and other works of the Spiritist codification, because he knew study is just as important as practice. Even though Francisco Cândido Xavier dedicated his life to the Spiritist cause, he did not let himself be carried away by the fame nor by the spotlight, since he knew that we should give freely what we have received freely. And that's a teaching from Jesus right there. Due to his mediumistic journey and his spiritual commitment, the medium, also known, of course, as Chico Xavier, he had the constant presence and support of his spirit guide, Emmanuel. Emmanuel, he was very firm, as there was a great need to cut down any traces of pride, especially vanity, as this could compromise Chico's incarnational plan. So Emmanuel was always there by his side. And of course, Chico, he was open to it by studying, by understanding his role. So he always allowed that connection with his spirit guide. Because most of the time, we ourselves, we tend to close our ears and eyes to our spirit guides because we don't want to listen sometimes. We don't want to hear certain things that are important, that are critical to our evolution, like you shouldn't be doing this. You should be working towards your moral transformation. You should be studying. You should be practicing more charity. Oh, but I just want to have fun. I just want to live my life, we say. That's boring. I have other things to do. But Chico knew exactly what he had to do. He knew it. He understood that he was a mortal spirit inhabiting a physical body temporarily. So there was this time where Chico, he got really excited after receiving a letter from a Spiritist center in Belo Horizonte, Brazil, which defined his presence as indispensable. Chico then asked for 2 days of work right away because he was so excited. He was so happy with the invitation. It was like, I'm going. I'm definitely going, especially because they really need me. So he took the train to Belo Horizonte. Already on the train, he was surprised by his guide, Emmanuel, who said, "So you think you are indispensable, and therefore you removed all the obstacles to travel as someone who performs a major task. Have you ever thought that your job is indispensable to you?" Who was Chico to be so needed like that he couldn't work around a better schedule, that he couldn't propose a new date or anything like that? Was he irreplaceable? Because we learn we're not irreplaceable. On the contrary, if we don't fulfill a task, God will find someone who can do it for us. He needed his job, just as he needed his spiritual work, of course. Chico then put some thought into it and immediately got off the train to take another one back home. And from that day on, he would never miss a day of work until his retirement. It is critical to understand that mediumship has nothing to do with moral development. In chapter 20, Kardec asks about this. Does the development of mediumship have any relation to the medium's moral development? The spirits say no, the faculty per se, it is organic, and therefore independent of morality. However, the same does not apply concerning its use, which can be good or bad according to the medium's character. Can be good or bad according to the medium's character. Mediumship is neutral. Who makes it good or bad is the medium. So the requirements that a person needs to fulfill in order to be good mediums are a genuine desire to do the good, and most importantly, repel selfishness and pride at all costs. And Kardec, as though anticipating many of our questions, he asks, what are the qualities of mediums whom we could regard as perfect? The spirits respond, you know very well that there is no perfection on the face of the earth. Thus, we say good mediums instead. good mediums. And that is saying much, for they are rare indeed. Perfect mediums would be those whom evil spirits would never dare to try to deceive. However, the best ones are those who are attuned solely to good spirits and who allow themselves to be deceived the least. Who allow themselves to be deceived the least. So good mediums are those who strive to be good people, to be moral persons, who are constantly working to establish good connections, to connect with minds that desire to do the good, and who allows themselves to be deceived the least, because we're all imperfect beings. That is why it's so important here that we do not treat mediums as though they're gods. That's a huge mistake and inconvenience. We're all fallible. And the medium is just as fallible as anyone else. We learn with Spiritism that mediums, most mediums actually, we all come with a heavy baggage of really, really harsh mistakes from the past. We all have things that we need to improve, that we need to change, and mediumship was given as a blessing to each one of us. So what are we doing with this opportunity? Are we doing to help other people? Or we're just using our mediumship abilities to satisfy our personal interests? Thus, we see that a serious mediumship, it requires a very great effort for moral improvement on the part of the medium, as spirituality does not simply give us things as though we are the chosen ones in a system of preferences. Even though that's our dream, that's our goal. We want them to come to us and to give us everything. But that's not how things work. We know that God has no favorites. Our Father gives us all the same capabilities, potentials, and it is up to us to develop and purify them. We remember the dear Ivone do Amaral Pereira, who reincarnated with expiatory mediumship due to her past existences. She was in huge debt with the divine providence. So she reincarnated with that type of mediumship. However, due to the effort she put into her moral transformation, due to the seriousness with which she embraced the service, she transformed her mediumship work into a mediumistic mandate, that is, into a true mission, because of her efforts. The more she was doing, the more she was given, the more she was receiving back. That's how things work. Give and you shall receive. Let us remember that the missionary is chosen and don't usually make a spectacle out of it. And so it was with Yvonne and with so many other souls who spent time here on earth, even anonymous servers, because you only think of the popular, the well-known ones, but there are so many other in voice of God acting on this planet that we have no idea of, working for God and for the spirit world without seeking the applause of the masses. Therefore, the true medium should not seek for this applause, for the recognition, or even perfection, but first of all, the medium must seek to fight against the vices of pride and selfishness, searching for the sympathy and support of the good spirits. If we force the presence of a particular spirit, or if we demand, because we tend to demand a lot, if we demand specific names of those who have already passed through this planet, as we only want to talk to the famous, we take the risk of being deceived. The Medium's book helps us to think on the real intention behind the desired communication. Why do I want this communication? Why do I need it to be a communication from the Spirit of Truth, for example? The name does not make one spirit stronger or more evolved than another. It is the message, the content that is going to make a difference. Rational faith, it helps us understand that no spirit, whoever they may be, will not be able to transform us if we don't do our part. They won't, because we're not going to be open to it. We need to open our hearts, our souls, to the help from the spirits. And how do we do that? By improving our thoughts, looking to establish better connections, by studying Jesus' gospel, of course, the Spiritist doctrine, always aiming for enlightening purposes. Communications, they happen naturally, we learn. They shouldn't be forced. The benefactors, they teach us that. As Chico Xavier used to say, the phone rings from the spirit to the material world, and not the other way around. Good, superior spirits, they do not answer to trivial questions. With Kardec, we learn about the importance of sober and structured spiritist meetings, so that they do not turn into fraud, falling prey to spirits who want to have fun at their own expense. A serious mediumistic gathering, it enlightens us. It helps us search for self-knowledge and inner transformation. It should always be instructive. A meeting is only truly serious when considering useful things to the exclusion of all others, especially curiosity. If we only join or promote a meeting looking to obtain extraordinary phenomena out of curiosity or as a hobby, the spirits who sympathize with them, they may appear, for sure. But the serious guides, they will for sure withdraw from it because they have other things to do. They're busy. They're busy. Like we said, so many people in need, in pain. Are they really going to spend their time in a meeting that's just for the eyes and not for the heart? Study meetings, they're quite useful for intelligent manifestation mediums, teaches Allan Kardec. Instruction, it comes before practice. Instruction comes before practice. We often dream about joining mediumistic groups. We imagine ourselves channeling the spirit guides, giving beautiful communications, but we leave the study aside. Many of us do not imagine ourselves doing the main thing, studying and practicing what we learn. How can we serve as an instrument for mediumistic manifestations if we have no foundation? Of course, the mediumistic phenomenon, it counts with the participation of the spirit. But the medium also plays a key role. Their soul also supports that communication, and knowledge, and their knowledge will help the medium better assist the communicating spirit. Spiritism must be ahead of our personal interests. If we put ourselves first and expect our desires to be attended at all times, we will most likely connect with other purposes that are not related to the Spiritist objectives of enlightenment and inner transformation. Why do I want my personal opinion to prevail over the Spiritist doctrine, over Jesus' teaching? They know much more than we do. The doctrine was designed by Jesus himself, so he sure knows what he's doing. Who are we to tell what should and what shouldn't be included in the Spiritist doctrine? Who are we? Kardec teaches us that the flag we have raised on high is that of Christian and humanitarian Spiritism, around which we're happy to see so many people gathered on all points of the earth because they understand that the anchor of salvation, the safeguard of public order, the sign of a new era for humankind is to be found there. We invite all Spiritist societies to participate in this great work. From one end of the world to the other, may they extend the hand of fraternity, and thereby they shall snare evil in the laces of an inseparable web. In this invaluable work, Kardec invites us to join our efforts around the flag of Christian and humanitarian Spiritism, as that is where our transformational path lies for the development of safe, healthy mediumship, which will surely be under the watchful eyes of Jesus and the Spirit of Truth. Jesus, he sanctioned mediumship and its lucid exercise. And the medium's book, it arrived to reinforce this, to bring us a safe guide for the development and education of our mediumistic abilities, showing us the way to find success at the end of the journey here on this planet, showing us the way to self-liberation, for us to let go of that heavy burden of our past mistakes, that heavy baggage we insist on carrying from previous existences. Mediumship gives us an opportunity to become better people, to help one another, to look around and see how many people are in need in this world. There's lots of opportunity for work. And thanks to the medium book, we can now understand, comprehend mediumship and its use for the good. We can and we must read, study, and practice this work that appeared with all certainty to execute and explain everything that Jesus taught and showed us during his time on the earth. And that is our little contribution to the topic. We thank you very much for your time and for your patience.
Thank you, Thiago, for this delightful moment of reflection. My friends, our next speech, our next meeting in this channel will be on November 29th, only 2 weeks from now. And it will be delivered by our brothers and sisters from the Federación Espírita de Chile. They will be conducting us through further reflections on chapter 29th of the Medium's book, item Meetings and Societies, or das reuniões e das sociedades espíritas, ou ainda, reuniões e sociedades espíritas. The speech will be in Spanish, and I will see you all then. May God bless you.
Thank you.